Step on this 55 Buick rat rod, rust rod, patina rod, just fun car build, whatever you want to call it. Rear suspension is next. Need an upgrade. So, look at that. Beautiful trailer. If I hadn't mentioned already, the whole idea of this car is to use as little cash as possible, but make it safe, obviously, and reliable. And just, you know, not be catalog shopping. I don't build cars like that. You gotta use your money wisely. So, in the spirit of saving money, and who knows, maybe I did save money, maybe I didn't, but I wanted to put a truck arm suspension in this. I still have the rear springs in there I got to take out, but I mean, there's a lot of different ways to change this rear suspension. You could put a 4-link in, you could put in the truck arm like I'm going to do, you could put a ladder bar, you could do all kind of different things. And at some point I do want to try to put a 4-bar in. Not try, but do it. But I have this trailer that I bought. I couldn't find any pickup trucks sitting around for parts like they used to be around. Now they're not around. But this is the back half of a 19, I don't know what they are, 60 to 72, maybe even earlier, half-ton pickup. So what we're going to use out of this is the truck arms, obviously, which are these long beams here. Those are the rear suspension links. And I'm going to, I don't know if I'm going to make my own front mounts or take those out or what I'm going to do. On the last Buick I did, I installed a truck arm. It was, I think, a later model, and it had a different design front mount. They're actually like riveted in. I can't tell if those are welded in or riveted in. I'll have to look at those, but I could cut them out and use them. But anyway, that's what I'm going to use. The lower arms, maybe the front mounts, the monster U-bolts that hold the whole thing together. That's probably about it. I'm not going to use the rear axle, and I'm not going to use the shocks, and I'm not going to use that panhard bar, although I will save it. I'm just going to use the 55 panhard. So anyway, oh, I'm not going to use the springs either. So yeah, this is going to be the donor for the rear suspension. So we'll see how that works out. For a rear axle, I'll get into that. I have to make sure which one I'm going to use, just to double check. I have to get my my rear wheels here. They're at a friend's house, some old wheels, and set them up to try to get a measurement and just to make sure everything's going to work. Because what I have here is a 308 8.5 inch 10-bolt posi. This is out of like a 80 or 81 Trans Am. It was originally a disc brake rear axle, but I'm not using those disc brakes because those things are horrendous. If you've ever worked with them, they have a really crappy e-brake system that freeze up, and the calipers are cast iron, and yeah, they don't work real well and they don't last. So I'm gonna put disc brakes on it, but it's gonna be a different set, and I'll go through that when I do it. But anyway, before I can commit and say yes, I'm going to use this axle, I just want to make sure with the wheels. My other 55 that I did put one of these second gen F-body rear axles in. Worked mint, but I'm using a different offset wheel this time, so I just want to measure, because this is a little wider than the original rear axle. I think was 59.5 wheel mounting surface to wheel mounting surface. These second gens are like 61.5. I considered maybe first gen F-body or early Nova, but the problem with those is those are 8.2 10 bolts, a little weaker. And we are going to make 500 horsepower with this car, no doubt. Is an 8.2 going to live behind that? I don't know. Probably, because it'll never hook up. At least I don't know if it'll ever hook up. It'll probably just spin the tires forever. But just to be safe, I'd rather have an 8.5 or a 9. But hey, I'm not guaranteeing anything yet because I just don't know yet. We'll see when I get those wheels here and I can take some measurements. But anyway, I got to break down this trailer, and something like this, I'll cut it up and I'll keep the steel, because I use the steel. I used steel off a frame to patch the front of this frame to make it straight. I already have it. It's just metal. It's not shiny and polished brand new, but you put a grinder on it and it all looks the same. And sometimes I think this older stuff is beefier than the new stuff. Who knows? But it works. So, next thing I'll break down this trailer and we'll go from there. Rear suspension, starting with nothing. So, this is how I'll usually do it. Find a couple of wheels with some tires that you think you want to use and figure out what kind of rear axle you would need. So, these are Corvette style rallies. FWs, common, and by FW I mean there's going to be an FW stamp on there around the valve stem. Maybe I can't see it with the phone, but common rally wheel, not specific to Corvette. These have 4-inch backspace on them, and I have currently on there two 55/60/15s. Now I had two 75/60s on there, which are of course wider, and they did actually fit in the car, but tight, but they fit. But when I set those tires where they needed to be on the ground, perfectly centered in the wheel tubs, lowered the car down, made sure it was where they wanted to be, put the car back up, and measured between the wheels, I got 60 inches, which means that to use those 275s, I would need a rear axle that is 60 inches wide to center that. So, what I have right now is the second gen F-body rear, which is about 61.5 inches wheel mounting surface to wheel mounting surface. So about 3/4 of an inch wider on each side than perfection. So I took the 275s off, put the 255s on, which are narrower. I think it's like 9-inch something versus 10-inch something as far as a wheel. And that overall measurement works. It's tight, but it works better, obviously, than the 275 would. But I'm going to put this rear axle up under the car with the tires and see what that looks like. So what I just did was, I have some straps hanging from the cross member on the frame. I'm just going to bolt the tires to the rear axle, lower the car, hook the strap on the rear, and then raise the rear and the car up in the air, and then just put stands under the axle, get it where I want it, and then I can get a real look at what the clearances are as far as the tires go, and then go from there. Okay, so with the second gen rear up on the stands and just kind of sitting up here under the car, with the two 55/60s, you see I've got a good amount of space between the tire and the frame, and on the edge out here we have clearance. It's tight, but there's probably a 1/2 inch. If I lower the car down more, it's more obvious what the gap is there. But these are on 15/7 Corvette rallies. I think these are 4.5 inch back spacing. These are the FW code rallies. They're pretty common. They're used on 70 to 72 Monte Carlos and other GMs. They're not Corvette specific wheels. I think the Corvettes had less back spacing. So, you know, I've got it pretty centered, just mocking it up. Same deal. I got plenty of room on the frame, and I've got clearance out here at the tire. It's just, you know, it's maybe a 1/2 inch, 3/4, not even 3/4. So ideally, the measurements I made on the floor are probably correct, as they should be. That about a 60 inch rear would probably be perfect. 59, 60, I guess 60, depends where you want to center your wheels. So yeah, but like I said, this is a build based on what I have. So I'm going to run this with the 255s. There's plenty of clearance to run it. I said if I lower the lift down, let's see here, this is one hand. Do two hands to lower the lift for safety. Can't do it, right? Okay, so if I lower the lift down now, it's a little more evident. The clearance, I can't get the phone under there, but there's plenty of room. It's just if the rear was, you know, 1.5 inches narrower, that would be another 3/4 of an inch clearance on each side. There is plenty of room. It's just the way it is. But I like the look of the wheels being out. I don't like them tucked way in. So ideally, the tires are where I want them. So I think that's just the way it's going to be. And I just have it said just mocked up right now. So final ride height should look something like that. Maybe 1 inch or so below the wheel housing. So I'm going to go with it. And what I'll do is I'll just keep in the back of my mind, keep my eye out for a narrower rear. See, the whole thing with this is I could put a 60-inch rear under here. I know what I need. Actually, a first-gen Camaro or a Nova rear is a little bit narrower and probably would fit even better. But the thing with that is you're not going to find an 8.5 real easy. Usually 73, 74 Novas had the 8.5 rears. Not as common as the 68 to 72. In fact, I have 68 to 72 Nova rears laying around, but they're 8.2s. And this is where we get into the deal with, you know, adding horsepower makes you do certain things. If I was just dropping a stock 5.3 in this thing with a cam, I run an 8.2 in it. Who cares? It's, you know, it'll live with a posi. It's never really going to hook up craziness, but you put a turbo on and now you start thinking, is it going to need the 8.5 to live? I mean, I don't plan on drag racing this thing hard, but I am going to beat on it for sure. And who wants to spit a spider gear or something silly? I don't know. I have not reached the limit. I mean, I have an 8.2 in my my 51 pickup with a 300 horse and a 6-speed, but that just spins the tires too. We're not going to break it, can't hook up. But this car, just in case I do want to try to run it and that much power, I think it needs to have the 8.5. I know about the Explorer rears, the 8.8s, but the pinion is way offset on that. And you can see here with the Camaro rear, you know, they have a slight offset, but it's pretty centered. The drive shaft's going to be lining with the tunnel. The 8.8 Explorer rear, I think the pinion is offset like 2 inches. So then you get into, you know, tunnel issues. You don't want the drive shaft hit the floor. You got to cut the floor and all that mess. And I don't want to get into all of that. And this pinion angle is not correct right now. I just have this sitting here. In reality, it'll be angled up a little higher. But this should be about ride height for it. And even that, I'm looking at it, there's not a whole lot of height there for the drive shaft to go up. But 3-4 inches should be all I need before it bottoms out. So anyway, after all that rambling, and again, I've been thinking about this all day. I even went to the local junkyard just to see if I get lucky and see if there were any 73, 74 Novas there. And I found a 70, but it's got an 8.2 as expected, and not worth the time. So I'm going to put this this rear in the car and go with it. And if I can find a deal on an 8.5 Nova rear axle, even if it's not a posi, you know, I can snag that and see how that works out. So now that the decision has been made to use the second gen F-body rear, I think I mentioned before, this one was out of like an 80 or 81 Trans Am, so it had factory rear disc brakes. So I have to get rid of those caliper brackets and blow off the leaf spring mounts, and we'll get started on this mess. And eventually I'm going to put 4th generation F-body rear disc brakes on this. I used the earlier 93 to 97 brakes. A lot of people like the later 98 up larger ones, but I like to run early style wheels. If I was running bigger wheels than 15s, then I'd use the LS style, but I'm going to use the 93 97 LT1 style disc brakes because, one, I already have them, and this build is all about using what I have to make some space, because I have too much junk everywhere and I need to make space, if that isn't obvious enough already. So we're going to use those, and those will work fine with the 15-inch wheels. Everything will clear. The later model discs, I think the rotor's too big and it won't make it. So first thing I do is get these brackets off of here and then go from there. Alright, so to get the caliper brackets off this axle, I have to pull the actual shafts out. Sure, there's 1,000 videos on YouTube how to do this, so this will be number 1001. Now I'll have to do this a couple times because I got to mount the other caliper brackets on for the newer style brakes, and that means the actual shafts have to come out again. Gotta love the smell of gear oil. Alright, here's something. I'll just show you something for those that are new at this. Somebody goes to sell you a posi rear. Yeah, it's always a posi rear, right? Sure it is. You gotta look. This is what you want to see. This is a GM 8.5. This is not a gov lock, which will be in the trucks. This will be a passenger car 8.5. You'll see similar in the 8.2, in the 12 bolts. All the Chevy rears similar like that, but not the truck. They have the gov lock posis when you see them, and they're real different looking too. But anyway, this is what you want to see. If somebody says they're going to sell you a posi rear and you really want to make sure it's posi, you'll see the clutches in there, and you'll also see this S spring in there on this style posi that keeps preload on the clutches, and there's clutches on the inside too, but you can't see them. But there's your real obvious look right there. If you open this up and all you see are spider gears and nothing in the middle but the pin, just a cross pin, no S-clip, no clutches, no nothing, it's an open rear. And if you spin the pinion, both axles should spin in the same direction. If you spin the pinion and only one axle's turning, if it is a posi, it's blown. And don't let anybody tell you, oh, it's limited slip. No, there is no such thing as limited slip. It is a posi, okay? So at least that's a GM term for it. It's not going to grab like a gov lock. The Zexel type posis that were used like in 98 up F-bodies, that's a different animal. Those will spin only one wheel, and you have to open them up to look inside. But as far as a clutch type posi like this, both axles need to turn same direction, not one going backwards. One's got to go the same direction as the other, and you'll see those clutches in there. Again, not talking about a Zexel, that's a 98 up F-body, and not talking about a gov lock in a truck, because that also has a rotational type locking system on it. But nah, it's getting off tangent now. But anyway, if you're going to look at a GM car posi rear and somebody insists it's a posi, look inside, make sure. And the other thing is, they're always, you know, it's always a 373. How many times have I gone to get a 373 posi and open up and it's a 308? Nope, not a 373. Got to prove it to them. The numbers are stamped on the ring gear. I'm not going to get a rag and clean this one off and check it, but the numbers will be stamped there for the number of teeth in the ring and the pinion. Just divide them, the number of teeth into the number of teeth on the, the number of teeth on the pinion into the number of teeth on the ring gear, and you will get your gear ratio. And then you can see what it really is. All right? Good enough. Worthless information, who knows who don't need it, but hey, we're all new at this at some point, right? All right, let me get this set back where it'll work. Come on. Okay, good enough. All right, I'll probably have to bring it right back in and around again. All right, so to get the axles out of a GM rear, you have that cross pin in there, this guy here that goes through the spider gears, so it holds everything together. This bolt right here, small, I think it's a 5/16 head. Unscrew that, and that's actually a pin that goes through the carrier into the cross pin. This is where things can go bad really fast. Sometimes you unscrew that bolt and the pin is broken. You'll back it out and all it is threads and the pin's not there. What happens is it breaks at the last thread and then the pin will be stuck inside the carrier. Then if you're lucky, you can get a pick and get it out of there, back it out. If you're unlucky, you may have to drill a hole in the carrier, which luckily I've never had to do. I've seen people do it. It's pretty dicey to me, but luckily I've not had to do that. But right now I'm going to take that bolt out, and things are either going to go smooth or they're not going to go smooth. Because if that breaks, I'm ending this video because I'm not going to sit here and record all of that mess that it's going to be. Anyway, let's see. It is a 5/16. Now, what if I'm going to have problems? Woo-wee. Got it. Alright, that's what you should get. And what happens is they break right at the end of the threads. Hopefully this isn't a camera view. They break right at the end of the threads, and that piece will get stuck inside with like just a partial thread on them, and they're a real pain in the butt to get out. But it's out. Hooray. Alright, next the cross shaft has to come out of here. Just push it out. It's that guy right there. That keeps the axles in place. Keeps them from pushing in, because the C-clips are in here that hold the axles in. Have to get them. And with the posi, it's a little bit more difficult to get those out. Let me get a magnet. Alright, so to get the axles out, just have to fish out the C-clips. Plenty of videos on this stuff, but they're inside on the axle. You have to push the axle in, and easiest way to get the C-clip is with a magnet that doesn't stick to everything like this one is. And I think I dropped it. I did. So my C-clip fell down in the oil. Wonderful. It's one thing I hate more than anything. It's the smell of gear oil. So I'll just have to stick my magnet down in the oil to fish that C-clip out in a little bit. But first I'm just going to slide this axle out now that the C-clip's gone. Okay. All right. Now I gotta do the same thing with the next one. Push the axle in to expose the C-clip, and the C-clip rotated, which means it's gonna want to fall in the mud too. So can rotate it a little bit so I don't have to fish two of them out of it. Let's see. Of course, nothing goes in 2 seconds like it should. Did I drop it? Yep. 2 for 2 in the oil. Stuff happens. All right, but the axle can come out. Pushed it in pretty good. Tap. Oops. All right. Now all I gotta do is remove 4 bolts on each side that are holding the caliper brackets on. Really don't think I need to videotape that. You guys know how to turn nuts and bolts. So get those off and come back. So I just popped the 4 bolts off out of that one. And then out she goes. So that's the caliper bracket for the factory WS6 8081 Trans Am, and we're going to switch to these. That's the bracket for the 4th Gen F body. So we'll just give them a quick cleanup, throw them on. Alright, so before I mount the other bracket on for the disc brakes, I'm going to cut these Camaro leaf springs off. One thing with plasma or welding, anything with electricity, obviously you're creating a current through the metal to do whatever you're doing, either welding it or cutting it, and that current will pass through the metal to get to your ground, including your bearings. So if you're welding or cutting something off, you want to put your ground right where you're doing your work, not on the other side of the axle, because you can send current right through your bearings to the ground and brine all your bearings, wipe them out. So when I weld the pads on here, I'll have the ground right to the pad, and when I cut these off, I have the ground right to the actual piece I'm cutting off. That way the current is just going from here to here. It's not traveling through the axles, not going through the bearings or anything else in there. So just a tip. May already know, some people may not. But we'll get these cut off and go from there. These may be easier to get off in pieces. Not going to be using, so. You get the idea. Just going to cut these off, get the tubing cleaned up, go from there. And that's all there is to cutting them off. Now I'll just do a little grinding and clean that up. We'll be in good shape. Alright, so I'm in the middle of cleaning up this axle tube. I'm just going to get these bolted on, or at least get this side bolted on, get the axle installed. No! Alright, so as I was saying before, I lost my phone and thought I blew it up, but otter case for the win, saved it. I'm just going to put these mounts on, get the axles reinstalled, and then I can finish cleaning these up. And after that's all done, get it mocked up and back in the car and see what that looks like as far as the control arms and such. Although something's in the works, I'm still thinking about changing to a different rear axle. So I'm looking into possibly a Mustang 8.8. I've been researching the widths on those last night. Looks like most of them, I think it's 08 and down, are like 59.5 wheel mounting surface, which would work fine. And might give a little bit more room for some more tire, or allow different use of different wheels. I'm not sure. This is going to work fine if I use it. Just have to figure it out and see what I want to do. It's not good to change your mind in the middle of a build, but regardless, setting this rear up isn't going to do anything bad for me because I build so many cars that it'll end up in something. Probably in the next Buick build. Who knows? But anyway, I'm going to bolt these up right now and go from there. So that's what the F-body bracket looks like bolted up. Nothing special, but there it is. So we'll finish cleaning up the tube on that side, cut the mount off the other side, and do the same thing and fish my C-clips out of the gear oil. So I'm going to smell like gear oil for a while, which I can't stand. The smell of gear oil. But we'll try to throw some gloves on so I don't get it on me too much. And I'll come back after everything's bolted up. Alright, so both brackets are on. Putting the last C-clip in, this is what they look like. Push the axle in a little bit. Hopefully I'm not blocking everything. Get the C-clip down onto the axle. She's in there. All right. That keeps the axles from falling out. Next will be cross pin. With the hole for the bolt that goes through there, the pin. This goes into the carrier and this locks it into place. So I've got to kind of lower this down, keep the bolt hole aligned with the correct end. Spin around. Go. And kind of fish it through. I usually push the bolt in a little bit just to get some tension on it so the pin doesn't fall all the way through, because it can. And then try to get it in. There we go. So just kind of push it on the bolt while feeding that cross pin until it catches the hole, and in it goes. this to crank too tight, just put it in. Torque specs, pretty tight. Not tight, not too tight. Just snug it up like that. And that is it. So, disc brake brackets are on. Put the cover back on. Buzz that down. And we'll move on to the next tasks. The LT1 disc brakes bolted up to the 10-bolt 8.5. GM's amazing interchangeability. So that's a 95 disc brake setup bolted on a 1980 rear axle. So pretty cool. Goes on, no issues whatsoever. And one caliper's on, the other one's not on yet. I'm going to bolt it on now, and then I'm putting this in storage because I could not stop thinking about this wheel offset and how I could get a bigger tire in here. I made a deal on a 1994 Mustang GT that I'm going to pick up tomorrow morning. I got to leave like 6 in the morning, 2-hour run. Go pick this cream puff up, and it has an 88 308 posi in it, and those are 58 and a half inches. If everything I read on the net is correct, and hopefully it is, who knows if it is. I do not know Fords hardly at all, very little, but everything is telling me online that a 94 Mustang GT rear axle should be 58 and a half inches wheel mounting surface to wheel mounting surface. So that's 3 inches narrower than this, obviously 1.5 inches on each side. And what's nice about the Mustang rear versus the Explorer rear is that the pinion is centered. So no issues with dealing with that mess with the drive shaft. So I should be able to put that in. These are 4-inch backspace rallies, and they'll still work. But I should be able to switch to AG rally wheels, which are 3.5-inch backspace, if I can find a pair at the upcoming swap meets. Or, even better, I think I'll just put 8-inch rallies on the back, which are still 4-inch backspacing, but 4 inches to the front instead of 3. So that'll fill it out a little bit more. And I can put the big 275 60s back on. Get even more meat under this thing. And I know they'll fit. So it sounds all good as a plan. We'll know after I get that axle on the floor and actually get a tape on it and get the wheels on it and see what's what. I'm also, obviously, because it's a Ford axle, the bolt pattern's going to be wrong. So I'm going to have to re-drill the axles from a 4.5 to a 4 3/4 pattern, something I've never done before. But I have an idea, and I'm going to try to do it myself without any fancy equipment. So we'll see you in the morning in the dark. I think it'll still be dark at that early this time of year. It's just turned March. So see you in the dark, heading to New Jersey to go pick up this Mustang GT.